So, hi everyone. My name is Tom and I am the events coordinator with Evidence Synthesis Ireland. Firstly, I'd like to welcome you back to our webinar series after the summer break. We are delighted to start off the new season with an exciting webinar titled, What Every Researcher Should Know About Searching. Just a brief introduction for those of you who may not know much about us. ESI, which includes Cochrane Ireland, is an All-Ireland initiative funded by the Health Research Board and the Research and Development Division of the Public Health Agency in Northern Ireland. Our aim is to build evidence synthesis knowledge, awareness and capacity on the island of Ireland. We have a number of key activities for achieving that aim, and one of them is a monthly webinar on an evidence synthesis topic. So our presenter today is Dr. Neal Haddaway, and he's a senior research fellow at SEI and has a Humboldt Fellowship at the Mercator Research Institute on Global Commons and Climate Change. His background is in environmental management and biological conservation. Since 2012, Neal has worked with evidence synthesis primarily in the environmental field, but particularly with the focus on methods development and the use of technology to optimize the accessibility, efficiency, transparency, and rigor of systematic reviews and systematic maps. Neal is the co-founder of the Evidence Synthesis Hackathon, a co-chair of the Campbell Collaboration Climate Solutions Coordinating Group, and leader of the Collaboration for Environmental Evidence Centre in Sweden. Neal is on the line now, but before I hand over to him, I'll just provide a bit of background on the webinar topic. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated that the research community is currently grappling with an infodemic, an explosion of research literature that makes it almost impossible for individuals to stay abreast of an evidence base. At the same time, the range of tools available for research discovery is continuing to expand. However, researchers often lack the necessary searching skills to transparently and comprehensively find research. Here, Neal will introduce a framework for types of searching and highlight why it is vital that researchers understand the different types of searching. He will also discuss the importance of appraising research discovery facilities like Google Scholar to ensure that they function the way we expect, and to drive up the quality of search tools available to use. Only with the combination of appropriate tools and practices can we deal with steadily increasing evidence bases around disciplines. So before we start, we will have time for questions at the end. So we do encourage you to type your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom as we go along. And hopefully you should be able to upvote these questions as well. We'll make the recording of this presentation available on our website, and we do encourage you to sign up to our newsletter too. So that's it from me for now, and I'll hand over to Neal. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tom. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Thanks very much for coming along. It's really privileged to be here to talk to you. Marina and Tom asked me to talk about the topic of one of the recent papers that I wrote about searching and sort of researcher understanding of what searching is. I'm not going to give too much of a comprehensive presentation about searching for systematic reviews. I'm going to talk more broadly about researcher skills in searching for information, but hopefully still be useful. Before I start, I wanted to just give some acknowledgements. Firstly to my co-author, Michael Gusenbauer, who is the brains behind a paper that came out in 2019, where we tested the functionality of 28 bibliographic resources, and then a follow-up paper where we talked about research skills, and that's where the title of this presentation comes from. But it also includes some preliminary work and ideas that have come from a project that I'm doing with Sarah Young, Kira Keenan and Christian Cole, looking at database use in Campbell and CEE systematic reviews, and also leans on a project that I've been doing in collaboration with Melissa Rethlefsen and Cabby that I'll introduce at the end as well. But a lot of what you'll see in here is really heavily influenced by my colleagues' excellent work. And so I hope what I'm going to give you as take-home messages after this talk is that searching in academia is often far more complex than we think. That the training that we get and the way that we behave in a searching capacity in society make us experts in lookup searches, and I'll explain what that means. Other forms of searching are vital for some types of research, however, and I'll explain the mismatch between being an expert in lookup searches and not being not having the right facilities for the other types of research. I also want to highlight that information specialists, librarians, research librarians are the experts in academic searching, and we really need to use them more. And if you involve a librarian in some searching activities, we really need to credit them. What they do is amazing and far better than anyone else could do without that training, and they often don't get the credit they deserve. Where librarians are not available, I do a lot of work in resource-constrained environments. So the two research institutes I work for don't have libraries. We're not associated with the universities. And I work a lot with people who do reviews from low and middle income countries and from small NGOs and other organizations. And if that's the case and you still want to do academic searching, we need to be careful that we are getting training in academic searching and that we teach ourselves those searching capabilities very carefully. And I'm going to talk about some common pitfalls. And we should always think about repeatability when we're performing academic searching. And that with respect to systematic reviews, even the best systematic reviewers sometimes get it wrong. It's very complicated. And that's why there's a whole discipline around information retrieval and information specialism. And also tell you a little bit about some tools that can help you to undertake and design searching in an academic way, and some facilities that are good for different types of academic searching. A quick caveat though, I'm an experienced systematic reviewer, and I've had experience of building search strategies without the support from librarians. But I've also started to work closely with librarians and information specialists, and I've learned a lot from them. A lot of the early stuff that I've done in systematic reviews with searching was very much self-taught, and as a result I've made lots of mistakes and learnt by those mistakes. But I think the thing that I'm hoping I can convey is that I've experienced a lot of frustrations of thinking I knew how to search and then realizing how little I did know. Just to say as well, this isn't meant to be comprehensive training in how to search. It's really meant to be what I think researchers need to know about searching. It's a systematic reviewer's perspective on what I've learned about academic searching. So what do I mean by academic searching? Well, obviously, it means searching for and finding relevant academic information. But I wanted to give 4 illustrative examples of searching and then talk about how they affect the way that we choose to interact with search systems. And so the first example is, let's say I'm trying to remember a paper, that paper by Mons Nielsen that was published about the Sustainable Development Goals, and it was published in 2016, I think, maybe in Nature. That's one type of searching. And then if someone comes up to me and says, find me a paper on the linkage between mask wearing and reduced COVID transmission, that's another type. Another question that relates to searching is what kinds of research exist on interventions to reduce transmissions of COVID? So same topic, but slightly different pitch there, slightly different framing. And then a question that really aims to get to a specific answer. What's the impact of tillage, which means ploughing, of the soil on soil organic carbon storage in arable soils? And I'll spend some time thinking about how those different types of questions affect the way that we search. But first of all, I wanted to introduce a framework that Michael Guspar and I pitched in a recent article to describe different modes of academic searching. And 2 of them were already developed, but we've sort of developed this a little bit further. And one that I've already mentioned is lookup searches. And this is where we have a specific need. We want to find a specific article or a specific bit of information. We might have a bit of information like the authors or information about the field, but we want to find a particular article or a particular piece of information. Then we have exploratory searches where we're trying to search as we learn, and we're evolving our understanding of a topic as we search. So it's sort of scoping searches, improving our knowledge as we go. And then systematic searches, which are comprehensive, reproducible, and transparent. They're meant to be relatively finalized when we perform those searches. And I'll spend a bit of time talking about the differences in goals in particular, but to illustrate what I mean by these three modes, we'll go back to those 4 questions. That paper by Nielsen et al., where I know a bit of information, but I want to get a specific article. Google Scholar is built really well for this. It's designed for this purpose because you can put in a bit of information, literally the information I have, Mons Nielsen Sustainable Development Goals, Nature 2016, and one article appears and it's the article I'm looking for. It's quick, it's efficient, it's built on a pretty basic search, but it does exactly what I want. That's a lookup search. Another type of lookup search is the second question, find me a paper on the linkage between mask wearing and reduced COVID transmission. And again, I might go to Google Scholar and search for mask reduced COVID transmission, and I get a set of results. And the first result seems to meet my requirements there, talking about surgical mask partition reduces risk of non-contact transmission in a golden Syrian hamster model for coronavirus disease. One of the cautions here, though, is that this way of searching, I'm performing a lookup search, but actually the objective of the search might not really be matching the type of search I'm doing. And the reason that I put a warning sign there is because I've searched for the term reduced, and Google Scholar is very intelligent at thinking about the order in which I see those results. So there are 23,000 search results, and I don't really know why that one has come up at the top. It's obviously to do with the matching of the words, but I've searched for a leading term there. I've searched for a reduction. I might have done that unintentionally, but it's very easy to end up cherry picking if we use a lookup search when our objectives are to find information more generally, like, is there a linkage? What's the direction of the linkage? So just a bit of a caveat that there's a warning that it's kind of easy to mistake these lookup systems for something else. And I'll explain that a bit more in detail later. Then an exploratory search system might, what we're looking for in an exploratory search system is one that helps us to evolve our understanding. So this is a search history in Web of Science, which is a bibliographic database platform that you're probably familiar with. And what you can see is over 3 successive searches, I've been able to improve my search string, my search strategy, by incrementally starting off with a fairly basic search, and then over time adding more terms in, and you can see the number of results increases. And I did this by looking at the results, scanning through, filtering, seeing if I'd missed some important terms, and then over time my understanding of the terms I need to search for improves. So that's the sort of type of exploratory search. And then this is a systematic search, this one about soil organic carbon. And the key thing here is that I want to perform that search. You can see the search on the left-hand side of the screen where it says you searched for. And what's key for me here is that I want to export all 6,834 search results and then analyze them to see which ones are relevant. And so slightly different search functionality is useful for that. But I'll talk about that again in a second. So probably most of you are familiar with systematic reviews, but just in case you aren't, a systematic review is a stepwise formulaic process for identifying, assessing relevance of extracting data from and synthesizing research information. And it goes through these steps, probably most of them are pretty familiar. But searching is obviously the really important first step in a systematic review conduct after you've planned your review. And you need to get it right. It's the start, the process that you'll then build on. And we want to make sure that we've got a comprehensive, correct set of records. And some of the central tenets for systematic searching are comprehensiveness, that we've tried to get all available information, that we have representativeness in our the resources that we search and the terms that we're searching for, so we minimize bias, that our search is transparent and repeatable, and that we are procedurally objective, or we try to aim for procedural objectivity in our methods. So just a bit about systematic searching there. And so just to give an example of a systematic search string, this is one that I'm just working on at the moment. It's a systematic review looking at the impacts of metal mining in boreal and Arctic regions on social ecological systems. And so you can see that the search is built up of blocks of different concepts. There's one about mining, one about the metal ore that's being mined, and one about location. And I found about 11,500 search results in these indexes within Web of Science back in 2018, but that just gives an indication of the complexity there. I can see a hand up. I'm not sure if that's asking a question now.
We can leave that till the end of the webinar. Sorry.
So to talk a little bit more about these different modes of searching, lookup searching has the goals of finding specific information quickly and efficiently, answering specific information needs, maybe verifying certain bits of information or certain theories that we have relating to the existence of an article. It can be a very easy way to cherry pick. Sometimes we might want to cherry pick, but in most cases where we're trying to inform policy, for example, that's a bit of a concern. It's also useful for rediscovery. So if you've seen an article and you're trying to find that article again, lookup searches is what we do. We do it instinctively because a lot of systems are built around this form of searching. But the key things that we need in a lookup search are ease of use. It needs to be an intuitive interface, and it needs to give us the results quickly. And ideally, we want a high specificity of the ranking of results so that the ones that we get at the top are most likely to be relevant to us. And as a result, and because of that, the systems that we use often involve some form of intelligent functioning. So they may learn from users. So Google, for example, learns from people how much they scroll and which results they click on. And then if you're from the same IP address, it assumes that you're looking for similar information and it adjusts the ranking accordingly. Google Scholar doesn't appear to do that, but Google does. So those kinds of intelligent systems are useful because it increases the efficiency. And an example is you just put in a few words and you find a specific paper. Exploratory searches, as I said, they're even sort of for an evolving understanding, learning about a concept based on incremental discovery. We often start with a fuzzy or ill-defined concept, and then we evolve our understanding into a clear and specific search strategy. One concept that is a central tenet is wayfinding, which is the word that's used to describe learning with little prior knowledge. Snowballing is often part of this. So if we're thinking about which search terms to add, we might start off with a very specific set of terms and then add them as we explore through the results we find in an iterative way. And filtering options there in the results are quite useful because it allows us to see different parts, different blocks of the results, and we can understand different chunks of the literature by using filtering. And I'll show that in a bit as well. And there's an example at the bottom. And then systematic searches, they're comprehensive final searches on a well-defined topic that yield an unbiased, exhaustive set of results. And the key thing there is transparency and reproducibility. And as you've seen from that example, there are building blocks that are composed into a clear and understandable search string, even though sometimes they're very long and complex. And transparent documentation that allows for replication is a key central tenet. But one of the tenets about the sources that we use in systematic searching are that they should be precise, predictable, and repeatable sources, so that if someone were to come along, repeat what we've done at the same point in time, they should get the same set of search results. And there's another example of part of a systematic search. So there are some considerations when thinking about searching, whatever we're searching for, where we want to search, which database, which resources, what we want to search for, so the terms or the strings that we're putting into those databases, how to search, which fields are being searched, is it titles, abstracts, and keywords, is it full text, what settings we apply to then allow the search engine to interpret our search. For example, you could adjust the date ranges, or you could use something called lemmatization, which is where search terms are interpreted a little bit less specifically. We may want to think about how to make sure that our search brings us back the information we are looking for. A couple of words for that you might be familiar with are benchmarking, where you have a set of articles of known relevance that you test your search string against. And if you don't bring them back, then you think about why they might be missed, and maybe you need to add in some search terms. Another word for it is validation, where you might have a specific search, a set of search terms that has been demonstrated to find a significant or all of the information available in a database on a particular topic. So you might have a search string or filters on COVID, and what you then have as the validated search string is a set of terms for COVID that have been shown to retrieve all available information on COVID, and that can then be reused. But it's important to think about whether our search is functioning as we think it is, or as we think it should be. And then we need to think about how are we using the platform. Lots of different search platforms work in different ways. Often they have different syntax. They accept search strings in different ways. So familiarizing yourself with a search platform to access a database is really important. And then another consideration is whether the platform functions as it should. And when we started testing these 28 databases, we found that some of them said that they accepted certain types of syntax, and actually they didn't interpret it correctly. So there's generally quite poor knowledge in the research community about which are the most reliable databases, because to some degree, we've assumed they all function, and then you suddenly realize, oh, it's not interpreting it in the way it should, there's a problem. And that's obviously a problem for repeatability of searches. So all these things are sort of making you think there's a lot to consider about searching. And then finally, if you're doing a systematic review or reporting on a systematic search, then you need to think about how to report it transparently as well. So there's a lot to think about, and there's a reason information specialists and librarians are experts, because they spend all their time learning about how to do it, and they do it as part of their main job. So they will always be the expert. It's very difficult to have a full grasp of this if you're not doing systematic searches every day. And so I mentioned this a bit before, matching a search facility to the objectives. If we have a lookup search, as I've said, Google Scholar is pretty good at that. We're just trying to find specific information, so it doesn't need to be comprehensive, it doesn't need to be objective. It's a black box because we don't know how it's ranking the results, but it doesn't really matter. For exploratory searches, it's really crucial to be able to filter and look through the results and learn as we go. Having search histories is also a really important thing, so that we can see how our search is evolving over time. Web of Science is good for that. The reason I have a little bit of a problem with Web of Science, as anyone who follows me on Twitter will know, is that it's often thought to be a database, and it's not. Web of Science is a platform through which you access databases. Some of those databases have been clustered together and called Web of Science core collections, but which databases you can access depends on your institutional subscription. So your Web of Science core collection may not be the same as mine. To add to that, one of the databases within Web of Science core collections might be called Science Citation Index Extended. That's one of the indexes in Web of Science core collections. And even if we both have access to it, we might have different results because the date range that you have access to depends on your institutional subscription. I might see 1975 to present, you might have 1900 to present. So it's easy to get information wrong when we're reporting what we've searched, which is why I put it sort of more as exploratory than systematic. Some of my favorite go-to resources for systematic searches are things like Scopus, lens.org, which is a relatively new database aggregator, and CAB Abstracts, which is a specific database for food security and agriculture. So matching what we want to do with the resources we're intending on using is important. And when we're thinking about what makes a good search system for exploratory or systematic searches, for exploratory and systematic, they need to be reproducible, definable databases, so not just a platform. They should be ideally representative and have an unbiased set of results. They should allow complex search functionality. So those complex long terms should work as they're expected to. And the search functionality should work as it says it should. So if it says it interprets and in a certain way, then it should. And ideally, we would want our search histories to be transparent and documentable. So Web of Science allows you to export, see, and then export your search histories and adapt them over time quite nicely. For example, for exploratory search facilities, it's useful to have filters, as I've said a couple of times, and then those search histories where you can incrementally improve as your evolution, your understanding of your topic improves. And then for systematic search results, we need the full set of search results to be visible. So if you find 9,000 search results, it needs to allow you to see all 9,000. Google Scholar doesn't, it lets you only see the first 1,000. And ideally, we want to be able to export our results. Lots of databases don't let you export. And lots of databases, in fact, most databases won't let you export all of the search results in bulk, which is exactly what we want to do for a systematic review. And then just again, I wanted to reiterate, there's a really important difference between a platform and a database. A platform is the search functionality that's used to search a database. So if imagine an analogy of trying to find information in a book. The platform are your eyes and your fingers, and the library and the desk. The database is the book itself. And that's ideally a definitive set of records that should be identical for anyone accessing it at the same time with the same search. But if you say you search Web of Science, it's not the database, it's the platform. And as I said before, some indexes have variable year ranges. This is mainly a problem for Web of Science. Apologies about the blurriness of the screenshot on the right. But this is what was sent to me when I did a survey on Twitter asking people which indexes they have access to in Web of Science. And on the left are the Stockholm University databases that I can access within Web of Science core collections, and on the right is someone else's. And you can see there's a difference in the databases and a difference in the year ranges. So if I just say we searched Web of Science core collections, there's going to be a difference in the number of results we get, even if we perform the results at exactly the same time on the same date. And so when we did this analysis on 28 databases or 28 search resources and aimed to look at how they compared, how they fared against tests of replication and whether they actually functioned the way they should, we tested 28 databases and we had 27 tests for functionality. And actually only half of those databases we could make recommendations that they would be suitable for systematic reviews because of problems with reproducibility and functionality. And some of the common issues were things like the databases don't accept complex queries. They had incorrect interpretation of queries. There were actually problems with the way that the query was being handled and interpreted. Many of them made it impossible or very difficult to export the data. And some of them weren't reproducible over time. So if we performed the same result from different computers or immediately after each other, we got different numbers of search results. And those are the kind of things that scare systematic reviewers because we're trying to be as repeatable and transparent as possible. And you can find out more about that in that open access paper. Another issue about searching that often we see very poorly done is that a lot of searches aren't reported in enough detail to allow replication, which is what we're aiming for in a systematic review or any sort of searching as an academic exercise. And that's often because of things like the variation between search systems. So lots of databases are very different in the way that they interpret syntax. People might only report the search string in one database and not in every database. So we don't know whether they used the same string or they adapted it. We don't know how they adapted it. There's very poor involvement of information specialists in a lot of systematic reviews in my field. Often they're not involved at all. And there's a lot of information that empirically shows that systematic reviews, for example, that involve information specialists are significantly better. There's also a lack of awareness about what's needed to reproduce a search strategy. So a lot of people don't really know what information they should be reporting. There's often, as I've said now, I think 3 times, there's a misunderstanding about reproducibility. For example, Web of Science being reported as a database. It's not, it's a platform. It's also easy to lose information about search history. I've performed quite a lot of systematic reviews and I've tried to keep detailed search records, but over a space of a couple of years, it's very difficult to then remember exactly what you put into which database. Maybe you've missed some information, maybe you've lost the file where you kept your search histories. Those search histories often aren't retained within the database for long periods of time. And it's easy to forget what to report, even with the best of intentions. And then there's a lack of awareness of reporting standards or lack of implementation of reporting standards. So standards exist to help you remember what to report, but often these aren't used very widely in a lot of systematic reviews we see. So when we're thinking about how to report our searches, this is one good example that I've seen recently where they've reported Web of Science core collection, but they've also reported the indexes and the date ranges that they searched. This is a sort of bad example where someone just said Web of Science. And this is an example of one that people really shouldn't do. They've used Google Scholar, which is great for Lookup, as a systematic search resource. So they've put this search string into Google Scholar, which Google Scholar won't interpret correctly because it's not intended to work that way. And then they've reported in relatively good level of detail something that they shouldn't have done. So maybe this isn't such an issue of reporting, it's more an issue of conduct. But there are lots of tools that can help us to conduct and report searches well, alongside information specialists. The Systematic Review Toolbox is a great resource for finding tools to help with systematic reviews more broadly, but for searching it has more than 60 tools. For search design, there are things like the Lit Searcher R package. If you're familiar with coding in R, it helps to identify synonyms you might have missed. There's 2D search, which allows you to visualize a complex search strategy. As you can see in the top right, it allows you to play around with your search and see a complex search in a slightly different way, which I find quite useful, and then to translate that search into different syntax for different databases. There's a tool called Polyglot, which allows you to translate a Boolean search between databases. So if you have it for Web of Science, for example, the platform Web of Science, you can translate it into what it needs to be in Scopus, for example. And then another resource that I mentioned before is lens.org, which is an aggregator database. So it's a free database that aggregates information from Microsoft Academic, from Core, from PubMed, from PubMed Central, and from Crossref. And the thing I really love about lens.org, as well as the fact that it's free, is that it allows you to share a search. So you do a search, you just click share, and you've got a short URL that you can send to people and they'll see exactly what you searched. But you can also update those searches. You can create them as living search results, and you get a notification every time that it has more information, and you can create dashboards to see the kind of information in your search analyzed across various different categories. There's a tool that, shameless plug, I developed myself for performing citation chasing. So I've talked so far about database searching, but in systematic reviews, we search for information in lots of other ways, these sort of supplementary searches. And by looking at which articles cite a set of articles and which articles are cited by a set of articles, you can find them in ways that don't rely on terminological linkage, but they rely on a citation network. If you're interested in downloading results from Google Scholar, because you really want to use Google Scholar, there's a piece of software produced by Anne Will-Harsing called Publish or Perish that allows you to export a set of search results from Google Scholar as an RIS file, which I find really useful as a supplementary tool for systematic searching. And then I've mentioned some databases that don't allow you to export search results. And some of those are quite commonly used in reviews. the status quo would be you screen those results in situ, but you can sort of improve the transparency and efficiency of your review process by using tools that are designed for web scraping. And these are tools that are designed to look for pattern data. So let's say you have a set of search results that you can't export. You could use a web scraping tool. There's loads of them out there, like Google Chrome add-ins, that allow you to export the search results as an Excel file or a CSV file that you can, if you wanted to, turn into an RIS file and integrate into your screening. There are lots of tools around that can do that. Some of them have a bit of a learning curve. And then tools that can help you to report your search. There's Prisma S, which is a set of reporting standards that is an extension to the Prisma reporting standards for systematic reviews and meta-analyses. This is specifically around searching, so it's a list of items and recommended ways of reporting them in a systematic review related to searching. There's also lens.org. I mentioned that you can share searches. That's quite a good way to share them amongst the team and report them. And there's a new project that is in beta testing at the moment that's being produced by CABI. It's funded by CABI, and CABI is a not-for-profit database publisher. So they have Global Health and CAB Abstracts are the two databases that they curate. But they've produced what I'm really excited about. It's an archive for search strategies. So it allows you to store a search strategy in full with lots of details about where you searched, how you searched, the search string itself. It then gives it a DOI, and you can have your authors then credited. So if you are an information specialist or a systematic reviewer, you can publish your search strategy. People can then copy it and paste it into a search to repeat it. We have plans to link this between different databases, so you can use translators to run a search exactly as it was. Incrementally, you'll be able to improve on people's searches and show that the search has been validated or benchmarked. But it's ideally to make it easier and much more transparent to report searches well, basically. So that's just been released, and check it out if you want. It is in the early stages, so things will change and improve a little bit, but we're quite excited about that project. So I think I'm going to pause there. Hopefully I've shown you that searching is really complex. Many of you already knew that already. If you're an information specialist, it's your bread and butter, you definitely knew that. Hopefully I've tried to show that the way that we think often we are experts in searching is only one type of searching. It's lookup searching. And actually other types of searching require different systems. They require different thinking. And if we go into it thinking we're doing a lookup search, we might end up making some really fundamental mistakes. And that's why information specialists and librarians are vital, because they know exactly what they're doing. And hopefully tools like Search Archive will really help to make it easier to credit the amazing work that they do. Where it's not available, I know firsthand that I don't have access to information specialists, and I've struggled to find support where I've not been working with a university library. There are resources online to help you do your search. There's lots of tools as well. But we need to be very careful when we're designing a search without an information specialist, because there's so many ways that we can make mistakes and go wrong. The key thing is repeatability through all of these processes. And I mentioned some tools that have been developed and that are in this process of being developing that can help us. But if you're using these tools, you still need to make sure you understand what searching is. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully that's been useful, but thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Neil, for the great presentation.